Hi, I'm Rowan, 25, and the last real conversation I had with my parents ended with them telling me, "You're the responsible one. You don't need help." That was right after they wired my brother $50,000 to follow his dreams of opening a beard oil shop/recording studio in Austin, and handed me a motivational mug that said "Rise and grind." I didn't rise. I didn't grind. I packed a bag, turned off my phone, and walked out. Growing up, everyone said I was the steady one. The reliable one. The one who never needed attention because I had it all together. Meanwhile, my brother Evan was the visionary. That's what my mom called him even when he failed out of community college twice, tried and abandoned 3 podcast ideas, and once spent 6 months workshopping a concept for an artisanal toast truck. Evan was the dreamer. I was the desk jockey. And apparently that meant I didn't qualify for family support. I got my first job at 16 bagging groceries. By 20, I was paying part of the rent while Evan burned through seed money from my parents trying to launch his line of hemp-infused shampoo. Spoiler, the bottles exploded in the mail. My parents laughed it off. "It's part of the journey," they said. When I asked for help with a down payment on a modest apartment, I got a long talk about fiscal responsibility and how it builds character to struggle a little. But the breaking point? That was last summer. I'd just gotten promoted to project coordinator at my job. Nothing flashy, just solid work, good salary, upward track. I came home one evening to find Evan popping champagne on the patio with our parents. I thought maybe he'd landed a job, maybe something had finally clicked. Instead, my mom turned to me beaming and said, "We just gave Evan a $50,000 loan so he can finally chase his dream. Isn't that amazing?" I blinked. "What dream?" My brother, in his 3rd new pair of Jordans that month, raised a glass and said, "I'm starting a lifestyle brand. You wouldn't get it. It's very vibe-driven." They all laughed. And me? I stood there holding a folder of my new health insurance paperwork and a 6-pack of LaCroix, wondering if this was some kind of prank. My parents handed me a tiny gift bag. I thought, okay, maybe something small. I opened it. Inside, a novelty mug that said, "Mondays are for mindset," and a $5 Starbucks card. I stood there while they toasted to Evan's future empire. My mom said, "We're just so proud of his courage." I nodded, went inside, put the mug on the counter, and started packing. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I didn't even say goodbye. I just left. That night, I drove to a friend's place, Naomi, someone I hadn't seen in months but who texted back within 30 seconds when I asked, "Got a couch?" She met me outside barefoot, holding a bottle of gas station wine and a bag of Sour Patch Kids. No questions. Just, "You staying 2 nights or 2 months?" That was more grace than my own family had offered me in years. The thing is, I didn't leave with some grand escape plan. I didn't have a startup in my back pocket or an online following ready to cheer me on. All I had was a well-worn backpack, my laptop, a few dress shirts, and a savings account that screamed cautious middle-child energy. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't budgeting for guilt. The next morning, I went to work like nothing happened. Finished a quarterly report, led a Zoom call, even brought muffins because someone had a birthday. No one knew that everything had changed. That my phone was turned off and shoved to the bottom of my bag because it kept buzzing with messages from my mom like, "You should be happy for him," and, "We didn't think you needed anything." Needed? I needed a lot over the years. Help with textbooks. A break from double shifts during finals. One single conversation where they asked what my dreams were, instead of assuming I didn't have any because I never made a mess. That Friday, I sat in a dim corner of Naomi's kitchen, eating dry cereal with a plastic spoon and thinking about how small I'd made myself just to fit into their idea of me. The dependable one. The background character. And something just cracked open. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. Titled it Project Exit. I didn't know what it would be. But I knew I was done being their safety net, while Evan got to jump into every fantasy with a check in hand. 2 days later, I gave my landlord notice. Signed a lease on a studio Naomi's friend was vacating. Tiny, creaky, weird view of an alley, but mine. I bought a real coffee maker. No more reheated drip from the office kitchen. I stopped answering my parents' texts. Blocked them when they tried to guilt me through extended family. Evan posted a boomerang of himself signing his first LLC papers. I didn't watch it. Because I was building something else. Something real. The turning point wasn't a big dramatic moment. No viral tweet, no headline, no accidental fame. It was a Tuesday. I was walking to work, same route as always, coffee in one hand, resume papers in the other. I was applying internally for a new role, a lateral jump with creative freedom and a title that didn't sound like corporate oatmeal. As I passed the corner bookstore I used to duck into for 5-minute breaks from family obligations, I stopped. In the window was a sign that read, "Event space available. Pitch us something." I have no idea why I walked in. But I did. The manager was maybe late 50s, wore a cardigan like a coat of armor, and eyed me like I was about to ask for a discount I didn't deserve. I asked her straight up, "Do you ever do small talks? Like, local speaker series?" She squinted. "We used to." "Why?" I blurted. "Because I have something to say. About burnout. About being the safe choice in your family. About building a life that isn't just stable, it's yours." She stared a beat too long. Then said, "You can have the Thursday slot. 7 p.m., don't waste it." That night I wrote my first talk. Titled it, The Middle Child Manifesto. I didn't sleep, didn't eat properly, just wrote like something was being exorcised. I talked about how responsibility had been used as a leash. About how being low maintenance became a curse. How I watched Evan flail and get applause while I quietly succeeded and got ignored. Thursday came. I expected 5 people and an awkward exit. 30 people showed up. One woman cried. A guy came up to me after and said, "That's the first time I've ever heard someone put my life into words." I walked home that night electrified. Like maybe I wasn't just the stable one. Maybe I was the speaker. The writer. The one with a voice. A week later, the bookstore offered me a recurring monthly slot. I started recording the talks, threw them up on TikTok as a joke. The third one hit 100K views in a day. People started DMing me. "When's your book coming out? Do you do coaching? Can you talk to my team?" My inbox turned into a waiting room. Meanwhile, Evan's lifestyle brand was still teasing a product launch that hadn't happened. My mom sent a group text asking if I could help promote it. I didn't answer. Because I had a different kind of launch in mind. The day I launched my website, I didn't tell anyone. Not Naomi. Not my boss. Definitely not my parents. I sat in my studio apartment, which still smelled like the new IKEA rug and last night's overcooked curry, and stared at the homepage like it might suddenly explode. It didn't. It just blinked back at me, clean and simple. Rowan James, writer. Speaker. Corporate burnout survivor. I'd put it together with a free template, some borrowed graphics, and a bio that still made me cringe a little, because owning your own story out loud feels like peeling your skin off, slowly. But I hit publish. Then I went to work. Just like always. Except things weren't the same anymore. By the end of the week, I had 6 speaking requests, 2 podcasts reaching out, and a small business newsletter asking if they could reprint my Middle Child Manifesto talk as an article. I said yes to all of it. Not because I thought I was ready, but because I'd spent 25 years being not ready for the things Evan got handed in a bow. And I was done sitting out. I stayed up late between spreadsheets and Zoom calls, editing blog posts and voiceover clips. I bought a decent mic. I recorded my first podcast episode from a closet with 2 pillows and a blanket taped to the door. It was chaotic. It was ridiculous. It was the most me I'd ever felt. That's when Evan called. 3 missed calls, then a voicemail. "Hey bro. So things are a little tight with the brand right now. We had to let the designer go. Mom said you're doing, like, talks and stuff? I figured maybe you could shout us out. Get some traction going. Let me know." He ended with, "I know you're probably busy with your little TED Talk thing." Little TED Talk thing. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I laughed. Loudly. The kind of laugh you only earn after decades of being the side character in someone else's drama. The next morning, I posted a clip titled, "No" is a full sentence. It went viral. The same day, I got an email from an HR rep at a major fintech company. "We'd love to have you speak at our Burnout Recovery Summit. Our exec team watched your latest video and said, 'Get that guy.'" And just like that, I wasn't the support act anymore. I was the main event. 2 months later, I stood on a stage in a downtown San Diego hotel ballroom wearing a thrifted blazer and the same jeans I wore when I walked out of my parents' house. The Burnout Recovery Summit had over 300 attendees, HR professionals, managers, mental health advocates, even a few overworked startup founders clutching iced coffees like life preservers. I looked out at the sea of lanyards and laptop bags and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not dominance. Not control. Presence. I told my story, edited, polished, but honest. About being the dependable sibling. The silent achiever. The kid who got the B+ and heard. Could have been an A. While my brother failed upward with glitter in his wake. I talked about being labeled low maintenance, when really I was just invisible. About how expectations can suffocate in polite packaging. And about the moment I stopped begging for recognition and built my own damn podium. They clapped. Not just politely, genuinely. A woman in the front row teared up. One guy filmed the whole thing. I walked off stage to 3 job offers, 1 speaking agent inquiry, and a man from LinkedIn asking if I'd consider turning it into a book. My inbox turned into a gold rush. That night, back at my hotel room, I stared out at the city and watched the lights flicker like neurons firing. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "Saw your talk online. Your dad and I washed together. We didn't know you felt like that. We're proud of you, Rowan." I stared at it. No apology. Just a declaration of pride, years late, and served cold. Still, I didn't delete it. Evan texted next. 1 line. "Hey man, congrats. I mean it. Think you could loan me a few grand?" I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded my invoice to the summit organizers. Then, for the first time in my life, I booked a vacation. Just me. No permission slips. No asking for time off from people who never gave me time to begin with. I picked Scotland. Don't ask me why. Maybe because it sounded quiet. At the airport, I sat down with my overpriced sandwich and thought about the kid who used to hoard PTO days like gold coins while Evan took 6-week creative sabbaticals, sponsored by parental guilt. Now I was flying first class. Not because anyone gave it to me. Because I'd earned it. Scotland was wet, grey, and perfect. I stayed in a tiny stone cottage outside a village that looked like it had been handcrafted by an old man with a beard and a pipe. Every morning, I'd drink strong tea by the window, watching sheep trudge past like they had office jobs. I didn't check my email. I didn't post. I didn't respond to comments. For the first time in years, I wasn't hustling. I was just breathing. One afternoon, I wandered into a bookstore half the size of my old cubicle. The woman behind the counter asked what I did, and without thinking I said, "I'm a writer." No hesitation. No imposter syndrome throat lump. Just fact. She nodded and pointed me to a quiet table in the back. I sat there for 3 hours and outlined what would become Quiet Rebellion: How to Burn Down Expectations Without Starting a Fire. It wasn't a memoir. Not exactly. More like a blueprint for people like me, the ones who were told they were lucky to be stable, when really they were being sidelined. Back in the States, I hit the ground running. I signed with a small publisher. Book deal wasn't massive, but the freedom was. I quit my 9 to 5 on a Thursday. My boss cried. Not because I was leaving, but because she'd watched my talks and said, "I finally get it. You never fit in here. You were always meant for more." That weekend, I moved into a bigger apartment. Not flashy. Just big enough to finally have a home office and a couch that didn't belong to someone else. Naomi helped me paint it. We split a pizza, and I told her everything. The book. The deal. The fact that I hadn't spoken to my parents in over 4 months. She raised her beer. To chosen silence. I laughed. To permanent voicemail. The next day, a package arrived. No note. No name. Just a gift-wrapped box from some artisan store. Inside was a leather notebook, monogrammed with my initials, and a card that simply said, "We should have believed in you sooner." No strings attached. Mom and Dad. I didn't know how to feel. It wasn't an apology. But it wasn't nothing. I placed the notebook on a shelf and walked away. Because I didn't need their words to move forward. But I'd stopped needing revenge too. The book launched 6 months later with exactly 0 expectations. No fancy campaign. No viral teaser. Just a quiet little paperback with a quiet little title on a quiet little shelf in a few hundred stores. But somehow, quietly, it started moving. People found it. Not influencers or tech bros or motivational speakers. Real people. Teachers. Nurses. IT guys. Ex-middle managers. Burned out eldest daughters. One woman messaged me. "I read this on my lunch break and cried in the Target parking lot. Thank you for saying the thing." It climbed. Slowly, steadily. Then suddenly. By week 3, it hit the nonfiction indie charts. Week 5, a podcast with 200,000 listeners invited me on. By month 2, I was doing a mini tour, libraries, universities, coffee shops with folding chairs and weak air conditioning. People sat on floors just to listen. They didn't want hype. They wanted honesty. They wanted to feel seen. And I was finally visible. One night, after a reading in Portland, I sat on a rooftop with Naomi, watching the city lights scatter through the fog. She turned to me and asked, "Do you ever miss them? Your parents?" I thought for a long time. Then said, "I don't miss who they were. But I miss the idea of them. The parents I thought I had when I was little. The ones who made pancakes on Saturdays and clapped when I got second place in spelling bees." Naomi nodded. "You grieved them." "Yeah," I said. "And I think I've finally stopped mourning who they weren't." She squeezed my hand. No lecture. No fixing. Just presence. The next day, I got a letter. Not a text. Not an email. A handwritten letter in a familiar, curvy script. My mother. "Rowan, we read your book. Twice. Once in silence, once aloud to each other. Your father cried both times. We didn't realize how much we missed while we were busy cheering for noise. You were never quiet. We just weren't listening. If there's room for a third reading, maybe someday, with us, I'd be honored. No strings. Love. Mom." I folded the letter and put it in the back of the notebook they'd sent months ago. Still untouched. Not out of spite. But because I had words of my own now. And I wasn't done writing them. Exactly 1 year to the day after I walked out of my parents' house with a motivational mug and a silent scream lodged in my chest, I stood on a stage in New York City, backstage at a sold-out auditorium, mic clipped to my collar, palms sweating through my blazer. The crowd beyond the curtain wasn't there for a rock band or a tech demo. They were here for a talk called "Invisible Until You're Gone, Why Stability Isn't the Same as Safety." And I was the speaker. Not the brother. Not the backup plan. Not the sensible child. Just Rowan James. When the spotlight hit and I stepped onto the stage, I didn't think about Evan's beard oil empire, which had quietly closed 4 months ago, by the way. I didn't think about the $50,000 loan. Or the way my mom used to say, "You're so independent, it's a blessing." I thought about the kid I used to be, the one who typed quietly in the corner while his brother broke things and got applause. And I smiled. I told the audience how quiet resentment grows like mold, how being the stable one often means being the neglected one. I spoke about the slow erosion of self when every achievement is expected, never celebrated. About the moment I realized I'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who only clapped when someone else was holding the mic. They laughed, they cried, they nodded like they'd been waiting their whole lives for someone to name that feeling. When I stepped down, people hugged me like they'd known me for years. Someone's dad said, "You just described my daughter exactly. I think I owe her a call." That meant more to me than 100 book sales. That night, back in my hotel room, I got a text from Evan. Mom and Dad are reading your book again. I think they're finally getting it. Took them long enough. Also, I just got hired at a real job. No oil, no brands. Just work. Weirdly satisfying. You inspired that. Hope that's okay. It was. He wasn't trying to impress me anymore. He was just growing up. For once, I didn't have to shrink to make space for him. And I didn't hate him for what our parents gave him. I pitied that he had to crash that hard just to figure out who he was without their funding. A few days later, I visited home for the first time in over a year. I didn't go for a dinner or a guilt trip or a big family reconciliation. I went because I wanted to. Because I was strong enough now to enter that space without folding inward. Mom greeted me with something I'd never seen on her face before: humility. Not performance, not forced pride, just a quiet sort of apology that didn't need words. Dad didn't say much. He just asked, "Do you want to show me your latest talk?" And when I did, he watched the whole thing. Twice. No interruptions. Just listened. We're not fixed. I'm not even sure what that would mean. But I left that day with something I never got from them growing up. Respect. And I gave them something too. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But a second chance. I walked back to my car, opened the glove compartment, and pulled out the Starbucks gift card I'd carried for a year like a scar. I stared at it for a minute. Then I drove to the nearest store. And bought one coffee. I sat at a corner table, pulled out my laptop, and started writing my second book. Because the truth is, that $5 card didn't just buy coffee. It bought freedom. And I'll be sipping it for the rest of my life.